So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about selective adoption strategy because I think that tees up a lot of future discussions on Fluid and reporting and analytics and how you upgrade and so on. And then the second webinar that we intend to do on February 11th, just so that we can do justice to all the content that is there in 855 that we intend to cover. In that one, we'll talk more in detail about lifecycle management tools. We'll talk about the new cloud architecture and deployment kits, update manager analytics that are now available with Tools 8.55, and also some of the new monitoring tools that are available like the Health Center. And there's also a blog post coming up on that on our website very quickly. So this is what we're going to focus on. So now let's talk a little bit about PeopleTools 8.55 at a high level. So what is it that PeopleTools 8.55 contains, and why is it a significant release in the PeopleSoft world, and what is it that as a customer you should be aware of? I'm categorizing this into three broad buckets. This is not the entire exhaustive list of everything that you could see or utilize in PeopleTools 8.55, but really the focus for Oracle, as far as I've seen in all of their presentations, and the interest that customers are bringing to us when we meet them at a conference or on these webinars is in three areas. One is Fluid. What does that mean for UX or user experience? Reporting and analytics. There's a lot of buzz about simplified analytics in 855, being able to create dashboard-style reports using Fluid in 855, and so on. So that may be a game changer as far as reporting is concerned. And I have some examples of where we've worked recently with customers to help them develop Fluid UI-based dashboard-style reporting. So I'll talk about that. Pivot grids, again, something that you've been hearing about from 854 onward. So it's not new to 855, but it's significantly enhanced, and what you can do with pivot grids has been made more powerful, so to speak. And then the third area is lifecycle management. So Oracle's been emphasizing heavily on not just upgrading and staying current with PeopleTools and PUM images, but also they've been focusing on providing more tools and more capabilities to help customers ease some of their maintenance overheads, if you want to look at it that way, and also to streamline processes as you go along. So PeopleSoft Test Framework plays an important part. So if you've been paying attention to the Spotlight video series that Oracle has, if you've looked at any of the recent presentations by Jeff Robbins or David Bain or others from Oracle, from product strategy onwards, they're always calling out Test Framework as an important piece of the puzzle because you're going to take on frequent updates with PUM, the tools, and with the changes that are coming for Fluid. As a result, you need a test strategy that allows you to quickly test and deploy these things. Cloud architecture, a lot of buzz around that, was first released or announced at Open World. There are these deployment kits that make deploying new instances and configuring them significantly easier, much faster. There is a concept of automated configuration management, which is a PeopleTools utility. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then PeopleSoft Update Manager and Application Data Sets, I'm calling those out here. There are lots of improvements in those places as well, but we are not going to talk about that in today's webinar. Some quick facts about 855. So it was released on December 15. It is not just for version 9.2. So for those of you who are on 9.1 and are not yet ready to upgrade, you can still get onto Tools 8.55 and start taking advantage of some of those newer features in 855. You can start building reports using Fluid if you wanted to do that. You can build some self-service features there and take advantage of it. That way you can use the monitoring tools and whatnot. It is not necessarily built only for 9.2, and that's been the case with all previous PeopleTools releases. There's always some backward compatibility with application versions. However, with 9.2, the added advantage is, and most of you who are on 9.2 already know this, but for those of you who have not researched this, the added advantage is when you're on Tools 855 on 9.2, you also get to consume the latest updates that are new features that Oracle is delivering through PUM, and that is exclusive to 9.2. Huge improvements in lifecycle management, some monitoring tools, but we'll get into some details there very quickly. So I want to talk a little bit about selective adoption. So there's a lot of talk about what this means when we talk to customers and they're in the process of upgrade. the most common reaction we get from them is, yes, we know what selective adoption is. We've heard about it. We've been to Open World or some other conference. We've seen YouTube videos with Mark Weintraub and Jeff Robbins and Paco and everybody else talking about it. But we have not yet figured out what our selective adoption strategy should be. And I think that's really important for customers to understand. Selective adoption has been provided as a framework by Oracle, which gives customers more control over how they can take updates once they're on 9.2, but customers still have to look at it from their own standpoint, their own business needs, and define the frequency with which they will adopt these changes, how they'll manage them, and what are the tools that are available for them to do that. So selective adoption becomes very critical with 9.2 because approximately every 8 weeks, you're going to have a PUM image available from Oracle for 9.2 applications. Give or take a few days here and there, that's why it's approximate. The dates are published by Oracle en masse, so you can look at those and you can plan your update intake based on that. Sometimes those dates may shift. HCM 9.2 PI 16, for example, is now scheduled to be out by the end of this week. It was expected a couple of weeks ago. Sometimes these things can happen. But in general, you're looking at about an average schedule of about every 8 weeks. But in every 8 weeks, you're going to have an image for FSCM, for HCM, and other applications. It's going to contain patches and fixes, new features, fluid applications, tax updates, the regulatory updates, and everything else bundled into a PUM image. So now it's important to understand that you're not going to go to a different place to get a bundle or a fix, a different place to download a new feature, a different place to download PeopleTools patches, or a different place to download tax updates. Everything is part of PUM now. So this makes it very important for you to have a plan and a strategy on how do you tackle this. A lot of this is going to come in. Regulatory updates, you cannot wait. You need to apply them on a certain frequency, especially as you get closer to year end. Things like tools updates, yeah, you may delay that, but if it's a security-related fix or a performance enhancement, you want to apply that quickly. New features, that's a call that you can make, and you can say, I'm going to punt on this right now. I'm just going to take a patch or a fix that I need or a regulatory update, and then I'll take on new features as part of a separate project. That's where defining a selective adoption strategy, the implementation aspect of it, becomes extremely critical. The first thing that customers have to grapple with is this is a mindset change. Maintenance is not a deferred concept in 9.2. And the reason why this is important to emphasize and understand is in pre-9.2 versions, I've met many customers who've been on 9.0 or 9.1 for years, and they have not applied a single patch or fix or bundle. And many a time it's for good reason. They are customized, applying a patch or a fix breaks other things. They have to do a lot of testing. It's like a mini upgrade at some point in time. But 9.2 kind of changes that because it gives you more control and allows you to select whether you want to apply the entire image, whether you want to apply a piece of it. And then it does a lot of work behind the scenes. When I say it, the lifecycle management tools like Update Manager and Change Assistant. It does a lot of work behind the scenes to help you package the complete set of information with pre and post requisites so that you don't have to do that manually like you did in prior releases. The second big thing with the mindset change is the business, as in your business users, your line of business, end users, power users, they are the ones who take the primary role in defining what that package of change looks like with each PUM image. It's not so much IT saying, I need to patch your environments, I need downtime or a maintenance window. It's more of the business looking at the CFO tool online, for example, or the planned features and enhancement sites that PeopleSoft has, which gets updated regularly, to look at what's coming down the pipeline, apply that to their business need and say, yes, this is critical, or this gives us a edge, or it improves our reporting, or improves our process, and so on. So business then comes to IT and says, I need something in PUM 18, please plan for that, apply it, here's how we're going to support that, here's how we're going to take advantage of that. PeopleSoft applications are no longer static. They're very dynamic, very responsive, and you're hearing a lot about that with Fluid. Fluid is mobile, but it's not just mobile, and I'll talk about that in the next section. But understanding that all of these updates that you consume give you the advanced capability for rolling this out to multiple device formats. I think that's a mindset change, and understanding that is important. And then going into this paradigm of configure versus customize. A lot of customers have had PeopleSoft for many generations, many releases, and you're carrying forward enhancements, customizations, bolt-ons, whatever you call them, thousands of queries, batch reports. All of these are your legacy thing that you're carrying forward. Many a time, these are critical to your business, so you cannot avoid that. You have to customize the application. But other times, it has been built for convenience. So looking at options, when you go to 9.2 and Tools 855, are there ways to configure some of these things as opposed to customizing it? Can we leverage a delivered feature and drop some of these things that we've been carrying around as customizations? That's important to understand. Once you have that set, you move on to creating your own schedule for selective adoption. You don't have to apply every PUM image. You don't have to upgrade to every PeopleTools release. It really depends on the frequency with which you are willing to adopt change, what's happening on your business calendar, how many projects you have, and what kind of bandwidth and skill set you have internally in your team. Where is the biggest impact to your business, as in where do you add value to your line of business stakeholders by applying a change or providing them a new feature or functionality? All of these things go into the decision-making criteria for you to determine what is the schedule for your selective adoption. Is it once a year? You may say as a customer, we are going to apply PUM once a year, so we get caught up fully with a PUM once a year. In between those yearly cycles, you may just decide to do patch fix, regulatory updates, which many of you have to do, and PeopleTools patches as needed. Once you have that schedule set, we highly recommend that you consider having an automated test strategy, because even if you apply it once a year, understanding the impact, regression testing that to ensure that nothing else upstream or downstream is impacted or broken, and having full visibility into that deployment process through automated testing becomes a very critical part of your overall selective adoption strategy. You have to think about building repeatable tests that are portable from one environment to the other. You have to think about how you can make testing consistent, accurate, efficient, and auditable. If you ever want to go back and say who tested what, when, and what is the outcome, you want a platform that gives you the ability to go back and query the system or run a report or look at a dashboard, preferred approach being the latter one, so that you always can go back and say, yes, this is exactly how we tested it, this is how we rolled it out. You have that history. So that's very important. So selective adoption strategy, I think defining your own strategy before you start consuming PUM and all of these new changes that we're going to talk about today becomes extremely important. So now, because there's so much interest on Fluid, and the majority of customers that are on today's call have not yet deployed Fluid, most of you, if not all of you, are not on 855 yet, so you're not faced with Fluid homepage as default. So taking into account all of these considerations, I thought it'd be a good idea to start with basics of Fluid, spend a few minutes talking about that, and then go into a demo to show you what it looks like, and then we can go into some Q&A for that. So Fluid 101, what is Fluid? So Fluid gives you the ability to improve the user experience for the PeopleSoft user in your organization. Many of you are thinking about Fluid as mobile. And that is correct, but that's not entirely what Fluid is all about. Fluid is not just about mobile, as in you don't have to deploy Fluid only for mobile capabilities. Fluid actually primarily is a user experience platform. It is a better way to transact and interact with your PeopleSoft application. It's a more efficient way of using the application. It changes the paradigm a little bit on push versus pull, where a lot of information is presented to the user based on role, based on their authentication and authorization privileges. And it relies heavily on this theme that you can guide a user through some complex transactions as opposed to having them tap through screens and enter 20, 30 input values to complete a single transaction. So it's largely about making the application better, making reporting better, making the user interface better. Now, Fluid does give you the ability to create a responsive application, which means that using standards like HTML5 and CSS3, whatever you deploy on Fluid automatically can be rendered without any code change onto multiple device formats. So you will still build Fluid applications or Fluid screens or even consume Fluid applications that Oracle is building for PeopleSoft 9.2. You would consume those as they're available. You would not change the code to make it work in mobile. That's the beauty of Fluid. It just knows how to render that content on a desktop, tablet, smartphone, tablet, whatever device format you're using. It is device OS agnostic. It gives you that tablet and mobile device experience with touchscreen controls and things like that. It is definitely fresh and a new experience for those of you who have spent years and years in the classic UI, although there's been some improvements there with work centers and dashboards. Fluid really takes it up a few notches and makes it very exciting. It also gives you a lot of personalization options, and I'm going to show you a couple of things in the demo today on how users can personalize their experience further beyond what a delivered Fluid application can do. Now, so moving on, what does Fluid look like? So you're going to see a live demo, but I wanted to cover some basics here in PowerPoint before you do that. So a Fluid homepage is going to look like this, and it can be tailored or customized. You're looking at something in financials. It has drop-down selections for what is called a Fluid homepage. There are multiple homepages that are delivered by Oracle for 9.2, for PeopleSoft 9.2. But you as a customer can create additional homepages that can be role-based or function-based, for example, in your application. You have the ability to look at tiles. So this is what you see in the big circle there is a tile, approvals tile. A tile can be static like that one you're seeing there, or it can be a little more dynamic like the expenses tile you're seeing right next to it. And what is dynamic about that is there's a dollar amount of unapplied charges that gets refreshed based on every refresh of that home page, or whenever you come to that home page, it looks for that most current piece of information. So without even going into that tile, you have some immediate information or some intelligence about what's happening. So you have a tile wizard in 8.55 tools, which allows you to create new tiles, add them to your home page, or share those tiles with others in your organization if you build a tile that you think others may also find useful and may want to use. Then you have notifications, that flag icon on the top right corner of your Fluid homepage. That gives you alerts on things that are programmed in the system. They can be driven by workflow and other such constructs, but it's very useful to have. Then you have an actions icon that allows you to personalize your screen and set some preferences and things like that. You have a refresh icon at the bottom right, and you have other things there. So why should you adopt Fluid? Now, that was a very quick intro to that screen. I'm going to get to the demo, but it's important for everybody to understand why Fluid makes sense and how it can drive value. It's really seamless in the sense that you can access information in Fluid that is currently in your classic UI, and you will see how the navigation in 8.5.5 plays a key role in that. But you can also take your classic UI components and pages and other things that you've developed over the years and move them over to Fluid with very little effort. You just need some information on how Fluid works, and you need some training probably on how to develop some things in Fluid. Have a good understanding of how HTML5 and CSS3 works, but those are not that complicated. Fluid just means that you can provide more configurable features and deploy them faster for your end users. And what we mean by that is you can create, let's say, 100 tiles exposing different types of information across your applications, and you can put them in a repository of tiles, and you can allow your users to add one or more of those tiles to their home pages so that they can personalize it. Now the user is not coming to IT with requests and saying, I would like this report, can you build a query for me, can you build me an SQR or an app engine, and I would like it formatted in such and such way. It has to have these types of colors, these sort of highlights, these drill downs. You go away from all that and you say, we're going to take a consolidated pool of business needs, not report requests, but what is the information that you want to see. We're going to create all of these things as styles or work centers or simplified analytics, and we're going to deploy that and say, go and consume as you see fit for your need. So that way it becomes a much more holistic approach to developing new features and exposing existing features. Fluid really gives you a lot of contextual reporting capabilities, and we're going to talk a little bit about that when we get to the simplified analytics section. So users can now make decisions in the context of the application screen they're in, as opposed to having to get out of that, run a batch report, download that, and look at the information in some offline format, and then come back to the online screen. That's the old school way of doing things. Fluid just makes it more dynamic, and you can make reports and analytics available on screen so that users don't have to step out of that experience to go and do something else. And everything in Fluid is still PeopleTools. It's not a new development platform. It reuses all of your existing PeopleTools objects. There are just some new constructs available in Fluid that make the deployment of that same PeopleTools metadata, if you want to think about it that way, easier and simpler. Now, who benefits from Fluid? I think this will play into, understanding this will play into your decision making on how you roll out Fluid and for what aspects of the application. So power users can get a lot of benefit from Fluid, especially when it comes to reporting and running queries and analytics. Casual users, especially when it comes to self-service applications, there's been a long-standing request from many customers on, for example, taking employee self-service and making it mobile-enabled, for setting up alerts so that users can get information pushed to them when something is due or they have to submit a performance report or a timesheet or an expense or something like that. Instead of waiting for them and sending emails, you can now have the system build out notifications so that they see these alerts and they can see them on their desktop, on their smartphone, wherever. It just makes it more interactive and more intuitive. Executives, if they want to see dashboard-style reports and they don't want to be bothered with running batch programs or looking at PDFs and things like that, which are offline, you want them to have the ability to see a dashboard-style report with graphs and charts and things like that, but still give them the ability to play with that data, as in see different views, or dynamically work with those. I think those are the ones where you get some immediate value, and these things are easy to deploy, and they provide a lot of good benefit that way. The other thing that you should think about when you look at benefit for Fluid is always have an eye out for what's coming down the pipeline from product development for Fluid applications in future PUM releases. So 16 is out for FSCM, for example. I'm sure there's 17, 18, 19 are in the works. We are testing some of the future PUM releases with Oracle right now as part of an engagement that we have with them. So we're getting some advanced previews. And I can tell you, it is just going to get much better than what you're already seeing in PUM 15 and 16. For example, on Tools 855, there's a lot more to come, and it's quite exciting. Some thoughts on how you should deploy Fluid. Obviously, you have to have a methodology, and most of you do in your organization, for rolling out changes and developing applications and whatnot. But specifically from a Fluid standpoint, think about getting to a more current PeopleTools release. Obviously, the minimum release for PeopleTools is 8.54 because that's when Fluid is available. But if you're not on 8.54 yet, think about going to 8.55. Don't be so concerned about the Fluid homepage being the default. That really is not such a big change management issue. It does require a little bit of training on how you navigate, but many of the classic screens are still in classic mode. It's just that now you have a better way to navigate and get to those screens. So we see that as a huge improvement over the current way of navigation, and I'll show you some aspects of the nav bar and why that's important. So use pre-built Fluid applications wherever possible. There's a lot of good content. There's more in FSCM right now than in HCM, but there are several planned enhancements for HCM 9.2 as well, as we heard in the Partner Summit in December, and when we met Oracle product strategy recently at a conference. And if you look at PeopleSoft, the planned features and enhancements website, I don't know how many of you have seen this. It's called PeopleSoft.pfe.com, planned features and enhancements, pfe.com. It gives you a listing of what Oracle's working on by application, by module, or by feature. What are the proposed enhancements that they're working on? And most of it is coming in Fluid the last time I checked. Now, it does not give you a hard date or a release commitment there, but at least it will give you an advance notification that this is something that's already in the works. So if you are thinking about building something custom, you may want to wait and check with Oracle on that piece. If Oracle's already working on it, deploy what they build and then configure it to your needs as opposed to building something custom. Now, there may be many instances where you have custom bolt-on applications today that, depending on when it was built, it's probably not as user-friendly as you would like it to be. It's clunky, too many clicks, not enough reporting, not enough self-service, for example. Those are good candidates to move to Fluid because, especially if these are applications that touch hundreds or thousands of users in your organization, it's very good to think about moving them over from Classic to Fluid because it could be a game changer. It could really change the way the users use the application. It could make it more efficient, more intuitive, and it could have some other positive unintended consequences. You could see a huge reduction in your help desk calls, for example, for those types of requests where people call very often and say, I don't understand how this works, or my system's not working, it's not giving me the report I want. You put more power in the hands of the users. So again, when it comes to testing all of these things, consider PTF. It is something that's available to you as a customer. You don't have to buy a license for it. You can use it to regression test all of these changes, including Fluid. In 855 tools, there's been some advanced capability in PeopleSoft Test Framework to allow you to test Fluid components. In 854, some of that was challenging, but 855 solves that problem. And then home pages. You can create as many of these as you want, and they can be role-based. I'm going to show you an example of how you can create a home page in the demo, but feel free to ping us later with questions, and we'll answer those, or we'll set up additional sessions to talk about that. Now, some recommendations on an approach. So if you have existing queries today, you can actually reuse them, but instead of thinking of them as queries in the Fluid world, you think of them as queries that drive data collection or information gathering through a pivot grid or some other new construct like that. That gives it some more sophistication. It makes the UI really pop, and it goes away from the old style of reporting where you have to run a query and wait for the output, and it shows you a tabular grid, which you really cannot interact with. Fluid home pages, as I said, there are several delivered Fluid home pages that you're going to see, but it's very easy to create your own home pages as well. Pivot grids, I just touched upon that briefly. We'll show you an example of how you can do that, and then we'll go from there. So here's just some examples of what these things look like, but I'm going to go through this. Let me pause here and switch to demo. So just give me a second while I switch screens. Okay, so I am logged into our PeopleSoft 9.2 FSCM 9.2 environment, which has been upgraded to 8.55 tools. So hopefully all of you can see my screen here. And I'm going to minimize my PowerPoint and go to PeopleSoft. Okay, so this is our home page. When I log into PeopleSoft, this is what I see. I don't see the classic menu page or the classic UI anymore. This is the big change that everyone will notice when you log into 855. When you don't have the option to go in through that cascading menu on the top left that you were used to seeing. Instead, you have these home pages, and you can drop down and you can see there are some delivered home pages. And this one around Fastest Manager Self-Service, that's a custom home page. So I just put that in there to show you how you could create a home page. But the employee, when they log in, the user, when they logs in, they will usually land at the self-service login page, home page that's been created. And this is, again, configurable or customizable. So you have the top right corner that has a nav bar, and the nav bar gives you the ability to navigate within Fluid to every menu that you were used to seeing in PeopleSoft. The only difference is that the navigation has now been brought forward into Fluid as opposed to kicking it out from here to a classic page and having you go through that cascading menu drop-down. Now, there are some advantages of this, actually. It's not that it's just a change to Fluid. It remembers the context of your navigation. So, for example, if I went to customers and conversations and something like update conversations, for example, right? So this particular screen is not yet available in Fluid, but the navigation of it was still in Fluid. When you clicked on that transaction or that menu item, it took you to a classic UI screen, in this case a search page. But if you notice, it's been sort of encased within the new Fluid homepage window up on top, and the nav bar and all of those things are consistent. So let me go back to the homepage and show you what I mean by it retains the context of your navigation. So if I go back to the navigator, it remembers where I was the last time as opposed to taking me to the main menu. And this can be tremendously useful because oftentimes you're working in the same area or a related area. You don't have to go to the main menu and find your module and then the transaction that you want to get to. This remembers that. It has a list of recent places that you can click on. You can create your own favorites, and you can edit and add as many of those as you want. Everything's available here. You can still get to the classic home, not something that we would recommend, but you still have the option to do that to get there from the Fluid homepage. And then you have these icons that you see on Fluid that are, oh, sorry, I just got a message saying you're not able to see the my window. What happened there? Let me see. Oops. Please start over. Okay. Got it. Will do. Apologize for that, folks. I didn't realize that it had not switched from PowerPoint. Just give me a So what I did was I logged out of PeopleSoft and logged back in just to show you how that works. So let me do that one more time. I'm just going to open up a new tab, log into my 855 instance, and sign in. And what happens when I sign in is you see on 855, by default, I am brought into Fluid. In 854, for those of you who are on 854, when you logged in, it would have taken you to your classic UI, and then you'd have had the option under main menu to go to Fluid Home to execute Fluid transactions or to interact with Fluid applications. 855 has changed that. By default, on 855, you go to Fluid, and it lands you in one of these home pages. I was showing these to you in the PowerPoint that you can have multiple home pages, and these can be driven by role or by business function. Obviously, employee self-service is self-service, and this is where most of your users will land when they log into 855. But then you can also have something for module-specific features like expenses or procurement and things like that. But let's just go back to the employee self-service page. Some of the things that I was showing you in PowerPoint. So the nav bar is here on the top right corner, and it gives you the ability to use the navigator to get to any feature within PeopleSoft that you would have otherwise accessed in older tools releases from the classic UI using the cascading drop-down menu. Now, what happens is if you go to a menu like this, like customers and customer information, and you say, I want some general information about the customer, what it does is, depending on whether that particular component page, et cetera, has been converted to Fluid or not, it'll automatically take you to that transaction. So in this case, it takes you to what looks like a classic UI search page, and that's fine because not everything is going to get converted to Fluid. Some transactions are not going to be suitable for Fluid, especially the ones that are heavy in terms of information, multiple tabs, complex transactions like that. Don't expect them to be ported over to Fluid anytime soon. But many other transactions will get to Fluid. But so what you can do is you can still use a navigator to get to any of those menu items that you are otherwise accustomed to going to, except that you won't go to that cascading style menu. You would now come to a Fluid navigator. The big advantage here is that it retains the context of your navigation. So you don't always start from the main menu. It remembers that you went to customers and customer information, so it puts you right back there. And then from there on, you can do additional things. So you can also have a list of recent places. So this was something that was there in prior tools releases, but that's there in Fluid. You can create your own favorites. You can edit and add more. But more interestingly, you can bring tile-based navigation links or the equivalent of that into this. So if I wanted to get quickly to expenses from navigation, I can do that. Sorry, something wrong with that link over there. But let me go back to my home page by clicking on that. But you have all of the navigation criteria and command options right there. Now on the home page, you see there are a bunch of tiles, and there's also a tile here that I've added called Demo. And the way I did that was I clicked on the Actions link here, and I said I want to personalize my home screen, and I just added that tile here. I could easily X that tile out and save it, and when I go back to my home page, that tile is going to be gone. So when I was talking about how you deploy Fluid, as long as there is a methodology that you've established, it can be your regular lifecycle management methodology or app dev methodology, whatever you have in PeopleSoft today, use that to now consolidate some of the information requests coming in from the business side, and as opposed to building individual customizations or queries or reports, you can now build a group of tiles by module, by process flow, by function, and you can create some, in other words, a repository of tiles, and users can have the ability to come in, edit their home pages and say, I'm really not so concerned about status reports because I'm not a manager, I'm an end user. I want to add a tile, and they can come in and click on this add tile and select for any tile across modules that has been published. And I'm just going to search for one that I created. It's called Demo, and I'm just going to add that. So it automatically adds that to my home page, and I can save it. Now think of a scenario where your users, when they log in, the first thing they want to see is a report. So as long as that report is being covered through a tile or accessed through a tile, they don't have to go and run a report separately. They can get to all of that from their home page. And there is no reason why they should not have more than one home page. So for example, as an end user, when you log in, it defaults you to your employee self-service page. But then you may also be a procurement user, so you also have access to a procurement operations homepage. And again, this can be personalized or customized, and you can go in from there. So now, when you go to the personalize icon again, you also have the option of adding a new home page. So this is where I'm saying you can create as many home pages as you want, and there are some templates available, so you can say, choose from that, and you can add tiles to it. So I can drag and drop something, or I can choose whatever I want, and I can save it, and it'll create a new home page for me. So very easily done as long as the tiles are available. So I'm not saying that all of your customizations and the custom reports and features that you want to see will automatically appear in Fluid. There is definitely some effort involved, but it's easy to do it as long as you have a good methodology and a good approach. And it's the same amount of effort, if not less, compared to a traditional application development that you would have done with PeopleTools. Now, some other basics about tiles. So you'll have some tiles that give you an action. So for example, approvals. You click on approvals, it's going to take you to a list of items that are in your queue to approve. And then there'll be some transactional links like expenses. So it says that I have $977.35 of unapplied charges. So maybe it's coming in from my corporate credit card, from an expense statement, from that's being loaded from my bank onto PeopleSoft, but I have not really put those into expense report and submitted them. What it does is it gives you the ability to look at what's pending, and you can take action based on that without even navigating to a single menu or clicking through anything on the menu link yet. If you scroll down further, you see the last tile that I added is actually a pivot grid-based tile, as in the information that you are planning to report to the end user is already being presented within the tile itself. So a lot of information can be pushed out to the end user without them even having to run a query. And this can be a critical alert, for example, a pivot grid that says, there's you're so many days overdue on aging for a certain customer, and you want that to be an alert, so you can set that up in a tile. And then if something pops up, let's say it's red and you've set a threshold for that, the user knows that when they come to that screen, that's something that they're automatically drawn to. They click on that and they take that action. So that's where the intuitiveness comes about. Now let's look at what a tile like expenses looks like. You click through that, and it takes you to the expenses homepage. You're not yet in a transaction page. You're still looking at more information about expenses, and it shows you there's some wallet transactions. You can add a quick expense. There's a link for that. There are some unsubmitted reports, and you can also create a brand new expense report. So if you wanted to add a quick expense, I did this yesterday on my mobile phone when I was traveling. So I connected to this from the airport, and I took a picture of one of my business cards, actually, because I didn't want to put an actual receipt in there. And if you're doing this on your mobile, it allows you to take a picture, attach it, just like you do on any other mobile application on your smartphone or on your tablet. You can do that. You can select an expense type, you can add it, and you can say it was a cash transaction or a check transaction, whatever it is, and you can just save it, and it goes into your expense report. I'm not going to save this one, but that's where it is. And then you have the ability to drill down and look at some analytic type information related to your wallet. So you saw that in the previous screen. Here it was actually presenting a slightly different view. It was showing you what transactions were available and by amount how it was trending. So lodging, there's $389 worth of wallet transactions, and this may be coming in from your credit card that you have not expensed or submitted. So at a quick glance, you get a lot of good information. It gives you the ability to act upon that, and it also kind of draws your attention towards those kinds of activities. So you can set up a lot of things like this in PeopleSoft where things are driven by analytic views like this, by alerts and notifications, and that should result in things getting done more efficiently in more timely manner as long as the right alerts and notifications are set up. So there is a little bit of setup involved behind the screens in terms of what sort of alerts and notifications you want. The event notification framework is excellent. It gives you a lot of capability. Workflow is very strong, as it has been in recent releases, so you can use that heavily, and you can build on top of that. Now you can come back to your home page at any time, and these are your self-service things. But I wanted to show you how a custom home page with a combination of some static tiles and some dynamic tiles looks like. And this is an example of our test automation solution that we've built for PeopleSoft. It's called Fast Test. Now, if you see the top row of tiles here, each of them takes you to a specific transaction or activity within our bolt-on application. But the bottom row here is actually showing you some real metrics without you having to click through and run a report or run a query or do batch or anything like that. So that's where I think Fluid becomes very powerful, is you can actually push information like this down to the user without them having to come in and run a query at all. I'm not saying that this is a substitute for every query or every report you have in your system, but a lot of times we find, especially during upgrade, we're working with a customer now that has more than 10,000 queries in their current version, and they're wondering whether they should upgrade it or not. Eventually, they're heading down the path of saying, no, we're not going to bring forward any of these queries because many of them are not being used. Many of them are just variations of some other queries. All of those things are good candidates for Fluid because Fluid gives you the ability, once you click into a tile like this, what you will see is behind the scenes, now this is the pivot grid. Behind the scenes, that it is being driven by a query, but you would step away from doing the old way of querying and reporting, where you say, oh, now I want to run the same query with a different filter. I want to look at a test category of purchasing. You don't have to do that. You can just come in and use your filters or facets, and you can dynamically repaint your test results. You can export this. You can look at details. There's a lot of things that you could do. You can say, yeah, I want to clear out all my filters, and I want to look at everything together. Now let's look at this for something that's delivered. So earlier I said you don't have to really build everything as custom and fluid. There's a lot of stuff that PeopleSoft has delivered so far and plans to deliver as it goes ahead with new PUM images. So here's a procurement spend analysis pivot grid that's available as a standard fluid pivot grid in 9.2. There's some features in here that are enabled by Tools 8.5.5, but a lot of this was also available in 8.5.4. So what you can do, you can change date ranges, you can add or delete suppliers, you can select spend type and things like that. Now, this particular feature that you see, business unit, this was really not enabled by default. So I went in and said, I want an additional filter so that I can sort through this by business unit and then focus further on that. But it gives you the ability to add all of those things, and you can say, I only want to look at PO contract type spend, and for a certain business unit within that. In this case, there's only one business unit that, you see how when I selected PO contract spend, it automatically eliminated the other business unit. So it knew that there was no PO contract spend on US 003, for example. So it automatically eliminated that as a filter, and it narrowed it down. And then I can further filter it by buyer, so on and so forth, and it gives me the information I want. When I click on this, any of these, they are all drill down capable, and it brings up a modal window, shows you some more detail. You can take an action on it. You can notify somebody, or you can build more related actions here. It just makes it very intuitive and very easy. Now, I'm demonstrating this from my desktop, but the same interface, it works exactly the same when you are in a tablet or mobile. The only difference you would see is it would automatically render this for that device format, aspect ratio of the screen, and so on. So I have a quick question here. Are all the fluid capabilities available with 9.0 and 8.55? So with 9.0 and 8.55, if you're specifically asking about campus solutions, so 8.55 will work with 9.0, and that's something that's been the case with all the prior PeopleTools releases. Whether there is delivered content that Oracle provides on Fluid for Campus Solutions 9.0, that remains to be seen. I don't think there is any at the moment. There may be a default homepage, but since Campus Solutions 9.2 is already out, and we have that running in a development environment, we can show you a demo of that if you're interested. I suspect that the bulk of the efforts for developing Fluid content will be focused on Campus Solutions 9.2 and not 9.0. Although, if you are, let's say, 12 or 18 months away from going live on 9.2, and if you want to upgrade to Tools 8.55 first, there's nothing that prevents you from taking many of your screens today and moving them to Fluid. I would just suggest that you take a look at Oracle's planned features and enhancement site so that you're not trying to build what they're already building or what they plan to deliver for 9.2. For 9.1, similar thing. There's not a lot of content that's being developed, but if you have Fluid and you want to think about converting some of your customized reports and things like that to the Fluid interface so that they are mobile enabled and they're available in a more friendly, intuitive way, there's no harm in doing that in 9.1 because those will carry forward to 9.2 when you do your upgrade, and they'll still be usable in 9.2. Okay, so thank you for those questions. If you have more questions, feel free to keep bringing them up. But let me go back to the home page here. So you saw quickly about how you could add a tile. Let me just show you what the tile wizard looks like, and I should be able to go to recent places and find that. So the tile wizard gives you the ability to create your own tiles. And again, a lot of this can be controlled through security in PeopleSoft, so certain users can create it, others cannot. You can do that. But the advantage of the tile wizard is, unlike giving users access to creating queries, for example, it's not the same. They don't actually run queries. They use pre-built objects in PeopleTools to define what their tile is. So I'm going to give it a name, 2816 Demo 2, and this becomes my second demo tile. And then if you look at the top, it's a guided process, right? So it's a horizontal guided process. It goes from basic information to data source identification. What is the target page that you want this to be on? What are some of the properties of the tile, review and submit? So from a change management standpoint for IT, business analysts, end users alike, very little is needed because it is very intuitive, follow a 5-step process. It allows you to go back and forth between steps, and each step is contained. So it tells you, I want basic information only on this step. Now I want you to identify a data source. So my data source, for example, is a pivot grid. So I can build as many pivot grids as I want using queries that I already have or new queries that I want to build, and expose that to my users who will create tiles. And I'll say, so let me go down here to a module, and I'll say I want to look at liability exposure by supplier, for example. Why not? You can pick any of those, and you can go in and further change the values and the parameters associated with what that pivot grid is going to display. I'm not going to bother changing that now. I'm going to go to the target page information. What is the target page type? So it's not a content reference, it's actually a viewer. I can put in some description. I'm going to accept defaults here. Tile property. So 1 by 1 essentially means it will be a square tile. If I make it 1 by 2, it will be a rectangular tile. If I make it a 3 by 4, it will be a really huge tile. This is new in 855 where tiles can be resizable. They don't all have to be the same fixed length or width. And you would make this determination based on what sort of pivot grid that is and how much information it has on it. So for example, you may have a really complex pivot grid that's running a very complex query behind the scenes, but it gives the user the ability to slice and dice information. You may take up an entire home page for just one pivot grid. That's possible. Depending on those types of design criteria, you would determine what that is. But in this case, I'm just going to accept the default again, review and submit, and I publish the tile. So there you go. With 5 clicks, I'm done. I have a tile. I'm going to go back to my home page, and now I want to consume that tile. So you see the demo tile already there. I'm going to personalize my home page, and I'm going to say I don't want this demo tile anymore, but I'm going to remove that, save it, and go back and add a new tile. And I'm going to search for it and say, see what it does. I should see 2 now. I had demo, I just created demo 2. I add it, I know it shows up here. If you notice, it put that in the same line because there was space for a 1 by 1 tile. The previous tile was a 1 by 2, so it dropped it to the next row. It automatically knows how to do that. You don't have to adjust that. So I see that tile here, it pops up. It took about a couple of seconds for it to populate, but it ran that query, which is behind that pivot grid, and it displayed that on my page, home page. And I can always click through and get into the detail of that tile. Okay, so in the interest of time, I'm going to pause here and give some time for questions. There's some more information that I want to query. Okay, so question here. How do all these tiles and PS queries affect the performance? Imagine 300 users trying to refresh the data. Excellent question. So obviously, you have to plan for the capacity that you think your organization is going to incur or have when you deploy this in Fluid mode. Fluid by itself does not add any additional overheads that your current PIA browser-based system does not add. It is still very lightweight. It is all standardized HTML5, CSS3. We've used this extensively. We've deployed this on a couple of projects. So it does not change the way you do things. So as a matter of running more pivot grids and more queries, I think this makes it more predictable in terms of performance because now users are not really going willy-nilly and running their own queries, custom queries, which may be dangerous or which may be performance hogs, whereas they are actually coming into a pre-built query that drives a pivot grid, so you can tune that query as much as you'd like. and the performance can be more predictable and reliable. So how are you going to conduct any session on project discovery? So I don't quite understand that question. I'm happy to take that offline, but if you have some more detail on that, I'd appreciate that on that question. How are all these queries run? They're run as scheduled or not? So if you have a pivot grid type tile or a wizard, a tile that you create using a wizard, and that is enabled by a query behind the scenes, they are run on demand. They're not run on a schedule. Now, you may have other types of reporting needs where things that are run in batch mode on a scheduled basis still produce outputs that can be displayed on Fluid. We didn't go into details of that, but that's entirely possible. So no, I don't see a complexity there. Next question, what are the skill sets needed to move to Fluid from Classic? I think it would be very advantageous if the development team or the developer that you bring in, if it's an external developer, understands not only how to build new Fluid applications using PeopleTools 854 or 855, but also has a good understanding or some prior experience, preferably, on how to use HTML5, CSS3 so that you can personalize the look and feel of these Fluid applications. It also gives you a good understanding of how these things get rendered, because you want to have some forward-looking views of what you build in Fluid. And just because Fluid is easy to build does not mean that you just start dumping a whole bunch of things on Fluid, right? You still want to have some good thought that's put into it and make sure that these are all things that are adding value to your business. But it's basic PeopleTools skill set, some training required on Fluid. I can talk to you separately if you want some training on that. We've built lots of Fluid applications for our customers and for our product FastS. We have encountered some issues. We've pushed the boundaries of it in 854. We knew what the limitations were, but in 855, there are definitely more advanced capabilities for Fluid development, and I'm assuming 8.5, the future releases of tools will have more for customers to look at. To pull Fluid content from other environments requires unified navigation, correct? So can you talk about unified navigation? So when you talk about unified navigation and you want to move that content through that into Fluid, this is not unlike how you would aggregate content in, for example, a portal environment. So if you're talking about bringing non-PeopleSoft content into Fluid, you would still set up all the hooks and make calls to the other applications or sources of information like you would do in a portal environment, except that Fluid becomes the presentation layer for that information. I'll have to get a little more specific with that particular question to understand what you're trying to accomplish, but yes, it is possible, and there are many ways that you can bring that information here. What minimal application and tools versions do you need to leverage Fluid? Minimal tools version required to start using Fluid is 8.54 because that's when Fluid was first available. As far as building Fluid applications, you don't need a minimum application version as long as you're on 854 or 855. If you want to consume pre-built or delivered Fluid applications, then that's available only on 9.2, PeopleSoft application version. For a home page in Interaction Hub, can the tiles display content from different instances, example, HCM and Campus Solutions? The answer is yes, because that is not really something that Fluid changes the way you do it. If you have a portal environment and you upgrade portal to 855, for example, then you have Fluid capability in portal. Now it's just a matter of still aggregating the same content through the same integration links and CREFs and whatever else you have to bring that information over into a centralized view. So Fluid just makes it better in terms of the way you present that. Does Interaction Hub inherit Fluid pages built in HRMS, financials, and CS? I don't know the answer to that. So I'll have to check with somebody in my team to get that answered. I know that there are portal packs that you would deploy in a portal environment for each of the pillars. I don't know if that means that, for example, an expense homepage comes directly into the portal Fluid environment by default or not. I don't know that. But that's something that I can investigate. Good question. I can investigate and get back to you on that. In Tools 855, is there a delivered BI publisher to replace each Crystal report that is deprecated? It's a great question, and I didn't cover Crystal in my overview, so thanks for bringing that up. So Crystal 855 is officially not supported as of 855. Crystal Reports is officially not supported as of 855 PeopleTools. In 854, there was still some limited support, but in prior releases in 853 itself, Oracle had started migrating away from that or moving away from that. What we understand from a discussion with Oracle, which we had at the Partner Summit in December, was it was not so much of Oracle's choice to not support it, but it was some licensing issue with SAP, which now owns Crystal. So what we understand from Oracle, and I think you should check with Oracle on this also on their support site or with your rep, is that for every Crystal report, there is an equivalent BI publisher report or some other report available in PeopleSoft today in 9.2. There have been some issues in the past with things like check printing, which didn't work quite as well in BI Publisher. It was troublesome. We've encountered that in some of our upgrades and things like that. But since then, those problems have been resolved, and there's no reason why you cannot build something in BI Publisher or as a dynamic report in Fluid as an equivalent for something that you were using in Crystal. Next question, can we maintain both Classic and Fluid simultaneously? You will have to, because everything is not going to be available in Fluid. And if you think about the entire PeopleSoft application, even if you just take one pillar like HCM, there are so many screens and so many pages and components. It's probably going to take a very long time to have everything available in Fluid, and I don't think that's the intent, the way we understand Oracle's product strategy's message. So a lot of these components will still reside in Classic. As and when Oracle moves into Fluid, you will see them in PUM images, and you make the decision on whether you want to adopt that or not. And you can continue to push your own development into Fluid where it makes sense. But the way you would coexist with that is if you are on 855 tools, your navigation would be by default through Fluid using the nav bar. And then from there, you would still be able to get to your Classic UI pages, but they would be encased in this new Fluid template as you're seeing here. So the top bar, which is now a slightly different color of blue, with the home link, the navigation bar, and the alerts link, those things remain consistent on the new navigation. Is Elasticsearch available in PeopleTools 8.55 today? This was something that was brought up by the head of Oracle Product Development for PeopleTools in the Partner Summit. This is something that is still, I believe, being worked out. I don't think it is available yet, but I would recommend that you check with Oracle on their website. What is the impact of Fluid features if Interaction Hub is not going to be used? No impact. If you have just one pillar of PeopleSoft, like Financials only or HCM only, and you upgrade to 855 tools, you can deploy all the Fluid you want, consume all the Fluid you want on your individual application pillar without having to go to Portal. Portal just gives you a nice way to consolidate and aggregate content if you have multiple PeopleSoft applications, or if you want PeopleSoft content and non-PeopleSoft content to be aggregated into a portal. But really, your Fluid strategy should not be contingent on having a portal. Now, many of you know this, but for those of you who don't, all customers have a limited license for Enterprise Portal or Interaction Hub. You don't have to go and buy a new license. Now, what is the limited part of it? There's some information in Oracle support about how you can use it, but you can deploy an instance of Portal today if you already have a license and a valid maintenance contract for PeopleSoft applications, and use that for no additional fee. But check on the details of that with your Oracle rep or your support representative. But that's what we heard from Oracle at a recent Partner Summit. Next question, do you have to upgrade to 9.2 to get Crystal equivalent BI publisher reports, or will the equivalent be available by simply upgrading to Tools 8.55? Good question. From what I know, and we've looked at this through several upgrade projects now, I don't think Oracle's building equivalent BI publisher reports for all Crystal reports in prior releases. I know 9.1 had some. I don't know if that is all the reports or not. Definitely with 9.2, I know there's coverage and there's equivalent reports there because we did a comparison of the report repository for one of our upgrade customers when they went from 9.0 to 9.2. I don't know if by going to 8.5.5 you would automatically get that. That's something that we can take as an offline question and post as an FAQ. So one of the things that we do with all of our webinars is we take all the questions that are available here through the chat session. In addition to the verbal answers that I'm providing on the webinar today, we are also going to provide that in written form and post that as an FAQ. So we'll try our best to get that information for you and put that on there. Can Fluid be disabled in Tools 8.55? We want to upgrade, but don't think our users are quite ready for Fluid yet. That would be the next step. So this is where I think you need to spend some more time evaluating Fluid and understanding why your users won't be ready for Fluid. I understand why you may not want to do it, but Fluid does not mean that you have to go to every transaction page in the new Fluid application. It just means that your navigation is through Fluid, but all of the classic UI screens are still available in classic UI. It just means that you will use the nav bar instead of the classic menu on the top left, a nav bar on the top right to get to that same item. So maybe that requires a little more discussion, some more understanding on why you would not want to deploy Fluid. It's default. The navigation is default. The home page is default. But the home page does not have to be this employee self-service home page. It can be a home page that says, click on this link to get to your classic UI page by module or by function. And that still makes it a much better interface than what you have today in pre-855. You said that you cannot consume Oracle delivered Fluid pages by just upgrading to Tools 8.54. Do you have to upgrade to 9.2? All the information that I have and all the experience that we've had with our upgrade projects, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think there is pre-built Fluid applications for 9.1 or 9.0 or any other prior release of PeopleSoft. I could double check, but I think I'm pretty sure about that. So to consume delivered Fluid, they are all being built for 9.2, and 9.2 has been out for more than a couple of years now. So Oracle's firmly in that area where I think they are only developing Fluid applications for 9.2. Again, something you can check on Oracle support, but in my experience, I have not seen Fluid applications for 9.1. I could be wrong, but I think I'm fairly accurate in saying that. Does PeopleSoft Performance Monitor and Health Center truly minimally impact a production environment? So that's a loaded question. So it depends on what you mean by impact, obviously. The Health Center does give you a lot of good information that otherwise was not available in an online view. So you needed a really savvy PS administrator who could run queries and tuxedo commands to get to the information, know the ins and outs of WebLogic, for example, to understand what is happening. But the Health Center, we're going to be covering the Health Center in our February 11th demo, which is going to be a follow-on to Tools 8.55 and focusing on lifecycle management tools. So all of you who are on today's webinar will automatically invite you and register you for that webinar, and we're going to focus on the LCM tools. But I think Health Center gives you a lot more. It's brand new, so it has things that you did not have before. So from that standpoint, I think it's a huge positive, and it gives you more tools. Now, if you're already using like Oracle OEM or some other third-party tool to monitor your transactions, then you'll have to compare the two and see whether this is more beneficial or not. Performance Monitor has been around for a long time. It's not new in Tools 8.55. There are some improvements there. But Performance Monitor, you have to be aware that it does introduce some overhead into your system when you turn that on. And so that's something that you have to account for when you size your environment and when you think about capacity, etc. So I can certainly entertain some more questions. We have another 15 minutes, but let me just switch to my slide deck here. I wanted to show you a couple of things on reporting and analytics. So we spoke a lot about Fluid because, again, I thought the way users registered, all of you registered for this webinar and the information you provided, we asked you this question on what was one of your main drivers for PeopleTools upgrade, whether you're doing it now, 3 months from now, 6 months from now. The majority of you said Fluid. So that's why I decided to spend a lot of time on Fluid. But reporting and analytics, I think it's important to understand. I must confess on this slide, this is something that I've borrowed from Oracle, from something that was on Oracle's public site. So, but really this was the best way to explain what you will get with reporting and analytics in Tools 8.55. I think the biggest advantage compared to 8.54 tools is that now you have the ability to do what Oracle calls simplified analytics. And what that means is that users can now, in the context of a transaction, build analytics right there by clicking on some things and selecting some fields and saying, visualize this for me, or show me a comparison of an employee salary versus some others in the same group so that I know where they are when I propose a salary change, for example. All of those things can be done in real time without having to switch out and go to query, download something in Excel, massage that, and create pie charts in Excel. You get away from all that. You can do that sort of reporting online. So that is really the biggest change in 8.55. And the ability to, as I said, you can push out information through tiles, pivot grids, and things like that that act as self-service reporting capabilities. And you can also give users the ability to take an action right there from the screen, as opposed to them having to wait for a batch report to complete. So now, just a quick summary of what we think is a major impact for reporting and analytics. So one, as I said, self-service. Users get information when they need it, and the emphasis is on when they need it. It's not a question of users having to wait for something or have built-in dependencies or something else has to complete. Users can really control the amount of information they see and also get to the level of detail they want to when they want it. Otherwise, they can stay at the summary levels if they want to. Providing actionable data in context. This is important. When you were looking at the procurement analysis screen, one of the things that I pointed out was you could actually look at that. You can put in filters for business unit, for example. So now you're putting that in a particular context, and there you can see the spend. You can get down to the detail level. Once you're at the detail level, you can issue a notification, or you can configure the application, not customize, configure the application to bring in more related actions related to that transaction. So everything is very contextual in this new way of doing things now. Related actions are not new. They've been around for a couple of PeopleTools releases, but from my experience, I've seen customers don't really use that. It requires a little bit of configuration. You have to take an existing page or component and build a related service for that and try that to the transaction page so that you can see related information. Not a lot of effort, really. It's quite simple, and it leverages Integration Broker for everything, but customers are not using that. In Fluid, you will use that to bring in information like that onto the screen without users having to go run reports or go ask questions to other module users. I think that's going to be a big game changer. And then the on-demand nature of information. So the on-demand nature of information means that I come into my Fluid homepage, I see my dashboard, my reports. I can share my reports with others if I want to, but when I want them, the report is there. When I don't want it, I can X out of it and it goes away. That's really on demand. It's really integrated into your UI, which means that whether you are in one device format or the other, whether you are writing a report or performing a transaction, everything is very well integrated. It does not seem disconnected from the way you're using PeopleSoft, so it makes it very intuitive. And then, you eliminate a lot of your query overheads. If you give users more pivot grids, more tiles, and more sets of fields that they can use as opposed to writing their own queries or asking IT to write queries and reports, It makes it self-service, but it also eliminates all of those unwanted queries. So you can take a limited number of queries, give them pivot grids, which gives them the ability to slice and dice the data and create their own views, and that way it makes their reporting better and more efficient. So those are the two things I wanted to cover on reporting and analytics. As I had suspected at the beginning of the webinar, I knew we would not have enough time to do a detailed demo, but in my next session, which is going to be on February 11th, I hope to cover simplified analytics, show you a live example of how you can build online analytics using Fluid, and I also hope to cover some of the lifecycle management tools in 855. So let me switch back here to the webinar and see if you have any more questions that I can answer, and then we'll do a quick wrap. All of the information that you're seeing today on the PowerPoint, I'll make that available through our website as a download, and you'll also get an email with those details. If you upgrade to Finance 9.2 PT855, how much effort will it take to set up menus and access to our already established security? How much time will it add to our upgrade, especially if you don't have any training in PT855? Okay, so let me break this down into a couple of different questions. So if you're already planning to upgrade to 9.2 financials from whatever release you're on, and if you decide to go to 8.55, the effort of converting security, in my mind, and from what we've seen in the PeopleTools 855 upgrade that we recently completed for one of our customers, it didn't change the way we handle security. You still have to handle security and make sure everything comes forward as part of the PeopleTools upgrade. Now, the additional step may be that there are certain things that you want to enable, the Fluid pages that are available, the delivered Fluid content if you want to consume that. If you want to control that through security so that only certain people see certain features, then you may have to add some more effort to security. But by and large, anything that you're bringing from your prior application version, let's say you're on FSCM 9.1 tools 852, going from that to 9.2 855, the security changes, the conversion, the modifications to security to incorporate all the new portal objects that are there in 9.2, that would have been the same regardless of whether you went to 855 or 854. So that effort does not go away. It's just that in the context of the new Fluid applications, do you want to selectively enable or show them only to some users and things like that? That's where you may have a delta on your upgrade. As far as time, it's hard to say that without knowing the specifics of your upgrade, how aggressive your schedule is, and how many people are working on it. Happy to field an offline question on that if you want to get in touch with me or somebody in my team, and we can give you some more inputs based on our recent example or experience of upgrading to Tools 855. Does PTF work for any pages developed through Fluid? Oh, yeah. So PTF does work for Fluid across the board. We are finding that there are some quirks that we are sorting through, and we're working with Oracle on that. But by and large, yes, things that are in Fluid in 855, there is good coverage for testing those using PeopleSoft Test Framework. In 854 tools, we realized that there were some areas where it was not as efficient with Fluid components especially, but anything outside of Fluid with the classic UI, it just works fine, and we've done several projects on that. So one of the things that we built, which I hope customers will see a value in, is that for tools upgrade specifically, as part of our test automation tool, we built a regression library of tests specifically to test PeopleTools. So oftentimes when you do a PeopleTools patch, for example, not just an upgrade, you want to be able to regression test some critical features of PeopleTools to make sure it's not going to bring things to a complete halt. For example, my process scheduler is working, my integration broker node is okay, queries are okay, tree manager, security. So we just put together a bunch of those critical tests for PeopleTools into its own regression set and pre-build that so that whenever you apply PeopleTools patches or upgrade PeopleTools, you can now run those regressions and speed up your testing. Obviously, when you do a PeopleTools upgrade, if you're already on 9.2, for example, and you're on 8.53 or 8.54, and you go to 8.55, you're not just going to test your PeopleTools changes, but you're also going to test several of your application functionalities, so just to make sure they all work. So there are several ways you can do that. Obviously, our recommended approach, our choice is PTF because you already own it, and we have a vast library of pre-built tests for PTF. But you can do that with any other automated solution as well if you choose to do so. PTF is PeopleSoft Test Framework. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's a record and playback utility. It's a Windows-based utility that is available as part of PeopleTools. As a PeopleTools or PeopleSoft customer who has a valid license, you own that product. You have to install it and use it to record and playback automated tests for PeopleSoft testing. Well, I hope the information that I covered today was useful. We're going to be talking about this in upcoming conferences. We're going to be at the Alliance Conference, HEUG, the first week of March. We're going to be at Collaborate, at Reconnect, at HIUG, and all these other conferences where we'll be presenting more on Fluid, on Simplified Analytics, on Tools 855, PeopleSoft Test Framework, and Test Automation. We're going to be doing all of that. So if you folks are planning to be at those conferences, we look forward to meeting you there. Please come and ask us more questions. Questions on today's webinar, please feel free to ping us through our contact form on our website. We'll be posting an FAQ of all of these questions so everybody can have that. But above and beyond that, if there are specific things related to your deployment, please come and talk to us, and we'll be happy to set up a phone call or a meeting. One more question here. PTF is part of applications in 9.2. So PTF is a PeopleTools feature. So it was first introduced in Tools 8.51. It is available since then as a feature in all subsequent PeopleTools releases. 8.54, 8.55 have made some significant strides in PeopleSoft Test Framework. So definitely something that I would encourage you to look at. One more question related to PTF. Is the library of pre-built tests an Astute library or from Oracle? It is something that Astute has built. It's proprietary. Oracle does not provide any pre-built tests for PTF. So we went ahead and built an entire repository of tests, automated PTF tests for every application. So for FSCM 9.1 and 9.2, HCM 9.1 and 9.2, for example, we have pre-built tests for every vanilla or delivered feature in these versions, and we continue to build those. We also have pre-built lots of end-to-end automated test scenarios. So if you want to automate the testing of recruit to hire, or hire to onboard to enrollment and benefits, or procure to pay, or order to cash, we have those scenarios pre-built. We've been doing webinars for that almost every month or every other month, and there must be a recording of one of those. We did one on December 17th. You should be able to find a recording of our test automation solution webinar on our website. And we'll have one coming up again in February, so stay tuned for that. And we'll be happy to answer more questions on PTF and fast test. Or you could visit beastute.com, our website, and from there you'll find links to our test automation solution as well. Well, thank you, everybody. Again, pleasure having so many of you on board. We just went past the 200 mark for registration, and I saw maybe viewer number 204 had signed in at one point. So very thrilled for your support and for your time. I know all of you are very busy with your day-to-day activities, so thank you for taking time out and listening to us. And stay in touch. If you think that there is more information we could provide, we'll be posting a case study on our Tools 855 upgrade and our Fluid deployment soon. And we're getting into several engagements where customers are specifically asking us to come in and do the first Fluid deployment for them, or help them convert some of their customized queries and reports to Fluid. So if you are interested in that, or if as part of your upgrade, you just want some help in defining what your selective adoption strategy should be and how test automation plays into that, and where should you deploy Fluid and where not. We've done some business consulting engagements from a strategic standpoint for many of our customers to help them lay that roadmap. So feel free to inquire, and we'll be happy to provide that service to you. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day, and please expect a follow-up email with a link containing a recording of this webinar and an FAQ and some other details that hopefully will be helpful.